At the start of the war, Ukraine tried to meet Russia head-on. Trenches, tanks, artillery duels. But against Moscow's overwhelming firepower, that strategy came at a brutal cost. The old way of fighting was unsustainable, so Kyiv shifted course. The battlefield is no longer just the front lines of Donbass. Today, the war is fought deep inside Russia itself, targeting its fuel, its economy, and its lifeline. And this is where Ukraine's new tactics begin. Instead of sending waves of soldiers into fortified Russian lines, Ukraine began deploying small sabotage teams and long-range drones. These units don't fight for villages house by house. They strike infrastructure, fuel depots, command posts, bridges, and highways. Each drone, often costing just a few $100s, has the potential to destroy assets worth millions. The results are already reshaping the war. Refineries that once produced vital aviation fuel now lie in ruins. Supply roads that carried ammunition to the front are cratered and blocked. Command centers, once considered untouchable, are suddenly within reach. This approach forces Moscow to defend everywhere at once. Every refinery guarded means fewer troops on the front. Every air defense battery moved back from Donbass leaves trenches more exposed. And for the first time, Russia is realizing it cannot shield both its army and its economy. But these strikes aren't isolated attacks. They are part of a much larger campaign, one designed to cripple Russia's war machine from the inside. Ukraine has redrawn the map of this war. The front lines are no longer just trenches in Donetsk. They now stretch into the heart of Russia's industrial core. Oil refineries, export pipelines, and fuel depots have become the new front. Take the strike on the Ryazan refinery, Russia's third largest. Overnight, production dropped by more than half, cutting into the very supply of aviation fuel that powers Russia's bombers. Or the attack on Volgograd, where a single drone disabled 6% of the country's crude output in just hours. Even the Druzhba pipeline, the artery feeding Hungary and Slovakia, was disrupted, showing that Ukraine can choke Moscow's exports at will. Each target struck is not random, it's calculated. By dismantling energy production, Ukraine cuts both fuel for the army and cash for the Kremlin. And as one refinery after another burns, the impact is spreading across Russia. On the battlefield, the effect is already visible. Every drone strike that destroys a refinery or depot means less fuel for Russian tanks, aircraft, and convoys. Commanders are forced to ration supplies, slowing operations that once relied on overwhelming firepower. Air defense systems, desperately needed at the front, are being pulled back to guard industrial hubs deep inside Russia. Each battery redeployed leaves trenches more exposed. Each unit shifted away weakens Moscow's ability to sustain momentum. In Belgorod, soldiers are now posted to guard intersections, not the front lines. Artillery fire continues, but resupply grows harder. Logistics routes once thought untouchable are under constant threat. The war of attrition Russia wanted is slipping away, replaced by a war where every liter of fuel and every truckload of ammunition is in doubt. For the first time, the Kremlin faces a choice no general wants to make: defend its army, defend its economy, or defend its people. And as the military strain grows, the cracks in Russia's economy are beginning to split wide open. The battlefield strain is only half the story. Behind it lies an economic collapse that grows deeper with every strike. Nearly 1/5 of Russia's refining capacity is offline. Seaborne oil exports are down by 20%. And inside Russia, gasoline prices have surged to record highs, forcing the Kremlin to impose a temporary export ban. For an economy where oil and gas provide almost half the federal budget, this is catastrophic. Energy revenues in July alone dropped by 27%. From January to July, the decline has been nearly 20% overall. By mid-year, Moscow's deficit had already passed its full-year target, leaving a shortfall of $61 billion. Banks are rejecting most loan applications. Inflation is eroding household income. Industries long seen as symbols of national pride, shipbuilding, aviation, heavy manufacturing, are now in visible decline. Russia can still print money, but each ruble buys less and less. This is the hidden front of the war, a financial siege designed to starve the Kremlin of the resources it needs to fight. Ukraine's new tactics doesn't just change the battlefield inside Russia, it reshapes the entire global conversation about the war. Every refinery disabled and every supply route cut reverberates far beyond Moscow's borders. The strikes are timed not only for military effect, but for political impact. Consider the Alaska summit, the first face-to-face meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin since the war began. Yet Ukraine and the European Union have been excluded. For Moscow, the timing is no accident. By advancing near Pokrovsk days before the summit, Putin arrived with fresh territorial gains to use as bargaining chips. His demand was clear: recognition of Russian control over nearly all of Donetsk. For Ukraine, that was unacceptable, a surrender of sovereignty and an open door to future invasions. But here lies the contradiction. While Russia tries to present momentum on the battlefield, its gains are fragile and already contested. Ukrainian strikes on refineries refineries, pipelines, and command centers are undercutting Moscow's ability to sustain those advances. Every kilometer won in Donetsk comes at the cost of fuel shortages, collapsing revenues, and overstretched defenses elsewhere. Meanwhile, Russia's allies watch carefully. Iran, North Korea, and even China are measuring whether Moscow can endure this war or whether Ukraine's new approach is slowly bleeding it dry. And beyond the politics, global energy markets absorb the shock of each attack, adding volatility for nations dependent on Russian exports. This is why Ukraine's shift matters far beyond the front. It's not only reshaping the battlefield, it's rewriting the terms of diplomacy itself. And as Russia feels the pressure mounting, the Kremlin is already preparing its own countermoves. Strikes meant to remind the world that it still has tools to hit back. Ukraine's strikes have weakened Russia's economy, but Moscow has not remained passive. Russian intelligence uncovered the Sapsin missile program, a secret Ukrainian initiative backed by Germany to produce long-range missiles capable of reaching Moscow itself. Factories in Dnipro and Pavlograd were preparing to manufacture up to 200 missiles a month. Russia moved quickly. Waves of Garand drones and precision strikes hit the production chain, destroying the Pavlograd chemical plant, essential for solid fuel engines, along with assembly sites and munitions factories. Without Pavlograd, Ukraine cannot sustain large-scale missile production, and rebuilding would take years. The episode exposed another problem: corruption inside Ukraine's defense sector, with funds diverted even as Western firms supplied key components. While Kyiv has shown it can strike deep into Russia, it also struggles to protect its own critical infrastructure. These Russian successes do not erase Moscow's mounting economic and military strain, but they underline a harsh truth: Ukraine's position is far from secure. With defenses stretched, mobilization under pressure, and its industrial base under attack, Kyiv's war of endurance remains just as uncertain as Russia's, setting up the final question: who can outlast the other? For Vladimir Putin, the war was meant to prove strength and stability. Instead, every refinery in flames, every fuel shortage, and every stalled offensive exposes weakness, not only to the West, but to his own people. Inside Russia, frustration is growing. Elites who once tolerated heavy sanctions are now watching their profits disappear. Oligarchs are losing billions as exports collapse. Ordinary citizens face rising prices and empty fuel stations. The promise of stability, the core of Putin's social contract, is crumbling. His generals need fuel, his bankers need liquidity, his inner circle needs reassurance that this war will not destroy them along with Ukraine. Every strike, every loss narrows Putin's options. He can prolong the war and risk collapse at home, or seek concessions that might preserve his grip on power. Either path carries danger. What began as a war of trenches has become a war of endurance. Ukraine no longer seeks to match Russia, soldier for soldier. It strikes where Moscow is most vulnerable: its fuel, its finances, its future. Every drone in the sky and every depot in flames is part of a larger design. To force choices the Kremlin cannot sustain. The battlefield may still decide the day-to-day, but the real struggle is deeper. Ukraine has turned Russia's own economy into the front line, and that may decide the war itself. If you found this analysis useful, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel.